Welcome, everybody. I want to thank everyone for being here today to discuss and introduce some topics about sacred sites around the world, and of course, for me, especially here in Southern Africa. And sacred sites go way back into the origins of our humanity. Recently, I've written a paper called The Origins of Human Spirituality that goes right back into the ancient times, and I'm involved with studying the sacred sites of Southern Africa and engaging with the indigenous communities. So I wanted to thank all the panel as well for being here today. I would like to maybe just offer you just to take, even if it's just 30 seconds, to introduce yourself and say who you are. All of us will get a much longer time to speak as well. But just before we start, if you can just introduce yourself, Rabbi, first.
I'm Yakov Nagen. I'm a rabbi. I live in Jerusalem. My organization is the Torah Interfaith Center. And the most important, I'm married to Michal, and we have 7 blessings every day, meaning our 7 children.
Good morning. I'm Slindo Shamase from Freedom Park Heritage and Museum in Pretoria, South Africa. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Amos, and the surname is Mulaudzi. I work for the National Heritage Council, which is an entity under the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture in South Africa. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Bhekinhlanhla Sibisi. I represent the AAFIS. AAFIS is an African Association of Indigenous Spirituality, which was founded by Imboni Dr. Uzulezwe. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm Dean Liprini, and I'm the CEO for the Sacred Sites Foundation of Southern Africa, and we were founded in 2012. And our quest is to support the communities that surround sacred sites, tangible and intangible, and there are many different religions and different beliefs that we are all involved with, but we are all ultimately children of God. And whether you acknowledge God or the creator, creation, whether it be masculine or feminine, all peoples believe to God and have the right to connect to their God in their own way and in their own sacred lands and places. So across Southern Africa, there are many, many different sacred sites that the indigenous peoples are wanting to continue to use, and they actually have many layers. So if you go back into prehistoric times, we find that mountains that had a specific shape or even a certain feel to the indigenous peoples of that land, they would choose it because it was a special mountain. It had this particular feeling to it that excited their spirituality. And the early peoples here in Southern Africa, especially the San peoples, they also used their rock art to express their spiritual connection to these sacred places. And now, with regards to the African beliefs, there are various waterfalls, like Howick waterfalls in Durban, that are all becoming under threat by commercial ventures, where people are either building and breaking them down, or the people that have access to these sites are actually being prevented from going to these sites in their own time and space, because national parks restricts the access to these lands. So we have been in communication with national parks and with government, and the COCTA and Culture and Linguistics groups of people that have supported us, but we are still battling to hand over custodianship back to the indigenous peoples. So in short, we are trying to create a custodianship management plan for sacred sites across Southern Africa that allows the indigenous people to take at least moral ownership of these sacred places and to have the right of access to visit them. Not if, like sandparks, they say, 6 o'clock when the sun goes down, you must be out, and they have to leave. When, of course, this is the special time, the powerful time that they want to be there at sunrise or at sunset. These are things that go back into human antiquity. And therefore, the rights, the spiritual rights of the indigenous peoples need to be recognized and acknowledged, because at this time, especially, the spiritual value and the spiritual core of communities is being lost and fragmented. And we need to help support the spiritual integrity of these peoples and these communities so that they can build themselves up and heal their broken spirit. So I want to offer each of the panel to speak into this, because not only do we need to have the access to these sites restored, but there needs to be protocols of visitation, and the spiritual leaders need to help define these protocols of access to these sacred sites. Many of the sites have been desecrated by spiritual groups. People coming there to offer their prayers, they bring with them certain things, bottles of vodka and cane to offer to the ancestors. Nothing wrong with this. However, they leave it behind and they make a mess. They just leave it. I had pictures I would have shared with you. So again, there needs to be a custodianship management plan that is actually put in place by the leaders of the communities, and hopefully working jointly with the Sacred Site Foundation, that we can put up a custodianship management plan to protect these sacred places and the integrity of these sacred places. So I want to hand over. I'll let you go first, Rabbi, and share about your sacred sites, your mountains and your temples.
Okay. Thank you, Dean. And I'm deeply sorry that my soul brother, Sheikh Ghassan Manasra, who wasn't able to make it, because then we'd be able to present together our vision of the holy sites in our land. I live in Jerusalem, in Hebrew, Yerushalayim, a city I love with all my heart, which means my heart is often broken, because we know that there's much conflict around the city of Jerusalem, but also much often uplifted. So I think the 7 minutes we get now, I will focus on the vision, problems, and path ahead. But in the second round, I'll use the last 2 minutes to show that even now in the present, there is so much light and beauty within Jerusalem. And because if people despair, feeling we're so far from where we want to be, when you despair, you lose hope. And when you lose hope, you become passive. So the good news part will be at the second round. Okay, but in this first the vision about what we would hope it to be. Yerushalayim has in it the word Yerushalayim Shalom. And as mentioned in the first day by I think Speaker Wendy, Shalom is much more than peace. Shalom, a mystical teaching, begins with the Hebrew letter Shin, which represents Aish, fire. It ends with Mem, which represents Mayim, water. Shalom is taking forces that are opposed to each other and finding a way to integrate them to form something which is greater by integrating forces like fire and water that would seem at first glance to be enemies of one another. So the Talmud teaches if someone at night dreams of a kettle, a boiling kettle, this is a sign of shalom, because we have in a kettle we have the water, we have the fire. But not only do they coexist, but they work together to create something greater. And this is the vision of our hope and prayer for Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, to be a place of connection. A connection in so many ways that the connections make it more rather than less. In the Abrahamic traditions, Jerusalem is a point of connection of heaven and earth, both in the Torah and the Bible, but also in the Islamic tradition. What is explicit in the Hadith, the site in which Muhammad, peace be upon him, went to heaven, was in Al-Aqsa. And so again, a point of connection of heaven and earth for all the Abrahamic religions. Within, it is a point of connection for unity within the Jewish people. Prayer is always directed wherever you are in earth to Jerusalem. But also, it is a place of connection for all of humanity. The book of Isaiah talks about the Temple Mount as a place, house of prayer for all nations. And in the very first dedication in the book of Kings by King Solomon, the most important topic he had to speak about in the speech, you also got about 7 minutes, about dedicating the first temple, was turning to God and saying, listen to the prayers of all the Gentiles, those who come from afar. And the reason I stress the word afar, from far away, a very movement. I have, for 20 years, I've been studying together with a Palestinian Sheikh, Khalid Abu Wawad, and we studied together. And he was so moved when we studied the prayer of Solomon. He says, you understand that this is the root of the word Al-Aqsa in the Quran, the 17th surah, Surah Al-Isra. And in the first verse, it talks about the journey of Muhammad to Masjid Al-Aqsa, which means the far away mosque. He says, realize there is a dialogue between the sources. The Bible, King Solomon, who is also in Islam recognized as a prophet, listen to the prayer of the non-Jews from afar. And the Quran talks about going to Masjid Al-Aqsa, the faraway mosque. And again, in the ancient temple, there were brought 70 offerings on the holiday of tabernacles, which is a very universal holiday in Judaism, because the ancient belief were that there were 70 nations in the world. We now have to be many hundreds, but and also to return again to the Islamic sources. For me, the Jewish Christian sources, since we have the shared Bible, are in common, is the Hadith that I mentioned earlier tells about the journey of Muhammad from Al-Aqsa to the heavens, and in his journey to the heavens, he meets both Moses and Jesus. And in Islamic tradition, I'm sorry that Sheikh Ghassan is not here, he would present it himself. This is the base of the pillar of prayer. So this sacred site in Jewish, Christian, Muslim tradition could and should be a place of deep connection. In the times of one of the Khalifut, there were coins with a menorah and of the Shahada by the Umayyad Khalifut to express this. Tragically, a place rooted in the sources of connection has become a place of conflict. The heart of conflict, I feel, is exclusivity. If, as Dini said so beautifully, that God is for all of us. God has love and compassion for all of us, and therefore a sacred site should be where there's a place for all. There is, but exclusivity has led to violence, and many don't know it. For 2,000 years, the Jewish people yearned to pray on the Temple Mount, but right now, Jews are not allowed to pray on on the compound. If we are allowed to go up, but there will be a policeman first to check you to ensure that you have not brought a prayer book or any religious item, because actions of Jewish religiosity have led to very deadly terror attacks, some of them very personal. My dear friend, Rabbi Leo D., his lovely wife Lucy, and his 2 daughters, one of them was a student at the time of my daughter in high school. They were killed in a terrorist attack because of a provocation of some act of Jewish worship. So the issues are very complicated. A place of connection has become a conflict and violence. But I would like to talk about practical paths forward that have been raised by, and do I have any time left?
Give me another 2 minutes.
2 minutes. So let me begin by quoting King Hussein of Jordan, who was a true leader of peace, who was sorely missed in the Middle East. He had a proposal: let the sacred site of Al-Aqsa Har Bayit be not this sovereignty or that sovereignty. Let it be under the sovereignty of God, of no nation claiming ownership of. This would be something that to realize it's not, in spirituality, it's not a zero-sum game, mine or yours. So this is the vision of King Hussein of blessed memory, and I've written a suggestion that I've tried to promote. I spoke to people both on different sides of the Waqf in charge, and about thinking about what is the true needs and of all people connected, to find again something, even a preferable status quo that could be good for all. I said, if I think about on a Muslim as opposed to Jewish perspective, for a change that could give each something that they deeply would yearn for. So what I wrote in an article, I presented it also in some national forums, for Muslims, I can understand that currently being a conflict, that the fact that it's necessary to have security, but having national symbols on uniforms of security could be something which I can understand why in the times of conflict, having a national symbol could be something which could deter. So perhaps a suggestion, have security, something which is done, people that are carefully vetted to be committed to security, but perhaps engaging people, in fact, from the world, and that could give a no less level of security for Al-Aqsa Temple Mount, and without a uniform that would be specially designed to express the sacred nature of this spot for certainly the Abrahamic religions and open for people of all religions. But together with that, to accept that Jews would have freedom to pray on our most sacred site without, in a reality that will accept it, that this cannot be seen as a provocation to lead to murder and terror. This could be an example of a win-win of, even before getting to King Hussein's very noble idea, which could bring blessings, and this is not a win-win of conceding to the other side, but enhancing the sanctity, and with this I will end, of a holy place that feels that is above and beyond any right-wrong conflict, and hopefully the vision that each feel the place is holier and more sacred when we see the others together worshiping our beloved God.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your sharing. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Sister, I move on to you.
Thank you, Dean. Morning again. Coming from Freedom Park and who we are really embodies what a sacred site is. In 1999, at the end of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, and how Freedom Park got to be established was through than our former president, Mr. President Nelson Mandela, who envisioned with the TRC a people's shrine in Freedom Park. And a shrine is something that is to be revered, respected, and holds dear, particularly as this shrine was meant to be a space of healing for South Africa. But just like Dean has said earlier, in management and managing this sacred site, we are also faced with some challenges of balancing access and making sure that the site still remains sacred and fulfills its spiritual value. It goes in two ways. First, the issue of the commercialization and monetization of these sites. Of course, we want sustainability so that these sites can continue to exist in a great way that they were meant to be. But as you commercialize, you are then making sure that you are pushing numbers and you eventually downgrade the spiritual meaning of the site. But at this, on another side, you are then restricting access because you are saying those who have and those who have money are the only ones who can be able to access this site. In my presentation for today, I wanted us to, as we speak about then the sacred site, look particularly in our entire Garden of Remembrance at Freedom Park. It was meant to be the shrine. But there are particular aspects of it, like Isivivane. I had asked the little one there to share, please, so that we can be able to see our space. And there are pictures, if you can go through this. And this is then meant to be the sacred space where we hold prayers of all religions, of all people, where we can be able to come together and do this work. But then there's then the Garden of Remembrance and our Wall of Names, which is now a space that is supposed to honor those who have died for the freedom of our country. Hence, we say we honor the heroes and heroines. I wanted to look at what are the roles of these sacred sites, especially in our cultural identity, and how do we protect these sites, find what are the challenges so that we can be able to put together strategies towards these challenges. Now, these cultural heritage and these spaces, some of it goes beyond what is tangible and can be seen. And how do we make sure that we extend, these artifacts and these spaces and sacred sites beyond what can be seen and touched? And also, how do we then build partnerships to be able to eventually make sure that these areas are sustainable? In Freedom Park, in particular, speaking to now the issue of Isivivane, we wanted to make sure that this is a space for memory and identity and the space where we can be able to come together to connect and honor and reconcile, particularly from the history where South Africa comes from. It is a place of gathering, and it's symbolic in a sense that we wanted it to present and all South Africans to find themselves in that space. It has about 11 boulders in there that are taken from key specific areas in other sacred sites of South Africa. For example, from Barberton Mountain, which is one of the holy sites in South Africa, there's a boulder from there, from Table Mountain, and Emakosini from KwaZulu-Natal. And the idea is wanted to say, we want a space to be able to represent those who could not be even found and be buried with dignity. Their families can come into a space where we find ways of bringing in their spirits and making sure that they are honored. How we do that, currently there is even a project that is spearheaded by our parent entity and Department of Sports, Arts and Culture. I'm from the same space that Mr. Amos is from, which is the repatriation of all our exiles who passed away in exile. And through spaces like Isivivane, we can be able to give closure to our families and the families of these heroes in South Africa to say, here is the place where we eventually bring their spirits so that they can eventually be able to rest in that space. So it holds that cultural and spiritual significance. The Garden of Remembrance in its entirety, it's meant to be this now tranquil space where even as a family, even if you don't have any spiritual or religious affiliation, you can find some peace and be able to bring in your family for a space of reflection and be able to then gather in any form of spiritual contemplation. The protection now of these sites, we've spoken about again, issues of security and preservation. I think for us, urban expansion, you've spoken about it, Dean, that as we expand, the space is needed for other urban needs, but also the commercialization aspects that I've spoken to, and even other basics, environmental degradation. For areas like Freedom Park, at the time when you have people like Nelson Mandela who built that site, who say, let there be the shrine. Eventually there will be funding put into building these sites. But as the people who envisioned these sites to exist pass away, now what about the continued maintenance of the sites? Who is supposed to continue to maintaining them? So now the issues now of funding and commercialization come in because you want to make sure you balance that. And various environmental degradation and elements from the weather and such, you are not able to then update as you wanted to be able to do. So for us as Freedom Park, to make sure that we preserve and ensure continuity of this site, key for us is community engagement. A lot of the programs that we are doing there center around communities. We work a lot with spiritual leaders from all faiths, as well as then political leaders to make sure that they can be able to find a home in Freedom Park. Various advocacies to make sure that these sites are well maintained and they can be able to continue to be sustainable. We do various education programs as well in various schools in the country to make sure that our visitors and the young people can be able to, in their curriculum, through the integration with the curriculum, can be able to find themselves in these sacred sites, know their importance, and be able to then take ownership, because as older generations die, the young ones must be able to take charge of these sites. Another thing we now hold that holds value with the sites is now the intangible that I've spoken about. In the sites then, we hold various commemorations. We will gather, but we will leave. But in our spirits and in remembrance, we can be able to continue to make sure that we remember those sites. We can be able to hold various rituals, ceremonies, and other practices in the sites, just like I was speaking about the spiritual repatriation of exiles and the people of South Africa that died in other spaces. The building of partnerships is very key and critical. And so that we can make sure that we continue to working. So collaborations with international partners like UNESCO to be able to make sure that we are in best practice. There are standardized ways we can be able to protect and preserve and be able to borrow from expertise that we may not necessarily be able to afford as Freedom Park. But also then working with local institutions like the South African Heritage Resources Agency that more focuses and looks at the grave sites in South Africa. Currently, they are even looking and are doing a benchmarking exercise on heroes' acres, we know with politics changing, there are many of our heroes and heroines that have died for our freedom where it may not sit well with others who didn't fight for this freedom. These sites get vandalized. The graves of Tatu Sobukwe, the graves of Tate Steve Biko, time and again they get vandalized because of what they stood for in unity of this country. So they are looking at finding ways of getting into these heroes in a space where their graves can be protected, as well as then the National Heritage Council that now provides the framework that guides the work that we are doing for spaces like Isivivane. So I'd just like to thank, to end there for Freedom Park and around these sacred sites that we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you so much. As indicated, my name is Amos. I'm from the National Heritage Council. And I'll start where, on the point that Slindo as well spoke about, especially when it comes to our ugly past as South Africa. I think it's very important to give context on why the NHC was established. Because prior to 1994, or before the dawn of democracy, there was bias towards, the preservation and promotion of heritage that was Western-oriented at the expense of that which, resides in origin, or that which, as Africans in the main, promote, especially our cultural, practices, the way we relate to the environment, to nature, a number of, features that have been spoken about where people, go and worship, go and intercede, with the super beings and the ancestors. So the NHC was established to redress and transform the heritage landscape so that, those who were marginalized prior to 1994 are also given an opportunity, to practice their religions, to practice their culture the way they are expected to do. But unfortunately, during that era of, colonialism and apartheid, deliberately so, people were moved from areas which they were connected to with regards to their spirituality, moved to areas, foreign in the way that they were not, connected to that particular environment. And over and above forced removals that happened during, the apartheid era, Slindo spoke about repatriation of the human remains. But as NHC, we look at other things that were removed because, as I indicated, deliberately so, the oppressors were able to take some of the spiritual tools or artifacts that were used linked to our religion and cultural practices and ship them somewhere else just to disturb, that connection between the people and those tools that they use for their, practices and the spirituality. So as the NHC, we aim to redress that past imbalance and ensure that, people are given an opportunity to practice. So that's why when we look at the things that are being done now, as much as Dean spoke about access to sun parks or some of the parks, but we know that most of the sacred sites, most of these objects which have been, taken to museums in Britain and other former colonialist, countries, most of these sacred sites and shrines that Slindo spoke about still remains in private-owned land. And people don't have access to this land. The 6 o'clock that SunParks, puts in place to ensure that people are out of the parks, it's worse with private owners, private land owners, because they don't even want people closer to their land. And that on its own led to disconnection between, the practitioners and these, sites that, they connect with in their spirituality. So for us as NHC is to ensure that we conscientize people, that they start understanding and not look down upon other people. Because for us to be united, we need to have tolerance. and appreciation of our difference, our diversity, even when it comes to spirituality. I was sitting here on the 9th of August, worldwide, with the celebrate and commemorate, World Indigenous Peoples Day. And in South Africa, we hardly do that. And that is the day in which the main objective is to educate people about the importance of these sacred sites, the importance of people's identity. So I think we need to go back as people, and especially as South Africans, that we focus on this day so that, we conscientize people about the importance of these sacred sites. And once people start valuing and understanding the importance of these sites, I'm telling you, they wouldn't want it to be destroyed. They will look after it. They will start valuing it and ensure that it's bequeathed for the current and future generations. So the message from us is to say, let us, engage as the different communities. If there's a need for some of the objects which have been, taken away from the people, for them to continue with their practices, they need to be brought back. So it's not only about repatriating human remains, but we can also start repatriating some of these objects that were taken away to be able, for people to be able, to reconnect again, because it's about identity. We, just like our sister organization, SNHC, we have programs in which we foreground, heritage within the school curriculum, and the main objective thereof is to ensure that our youngsters understand their heritage, because they were made to believe that their heritage is not important. Mm-hmm. They even look down upon our practices as people, because they were so brainwashed and think that only Christianity is the religion. But all this, in their diversity, they work towards the common ground. It's about unity, it's about people development, and I want to believe that it's about creation. So we don't have to look down upon any other religion, but in our diversity, start understanding and appreciating who we are. But as I end my short presentation, ours is just to ensure that people have access to this to be able to practice, and if it's possible through the programs and platform of this nature, engage those who have in their possession objects and artifacts that belong to the other community, which it's dearly needed for them to continue with their practices. It's only then that we'll start appreciating each other and valuing each other's practice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've done the introduction already, but I feel it's very important for me just to state just one point, okay, which is basically the core or the objective of AAFIS. Just to mention one is to give expression to the African indigenous spirituality for the revival of African morals and spiritual values, e.g. respect, in promoting the knowing system and principle of Ubuntu. Now, my presentation is more on AIS perspective, which is African indigenous spirituality. Okay, our sacred places are mainly the mountains, rivers, and the oceans. In African spirituality, our sacred place, as I've just said, these are not just the part of the landscape. They are very powerful spiritual centers where we regroup and connect and also perform some rituals. The mountain in particular is regarded as a natural temple. It is a place of worship. It is a place that where you can do the reflection and elevation, where we can also call upon our Creator and our deities. Climbing the mountain is both a physical and a spiritual journey, symbolizing our desire to get closer to the divine. Likewise, rivers and ocean hold a deep spiritual significance. They are seen as a living entity, sources of life, cleansing, and spiritual rebirth. Many AIS, African Indigenous Spiritualities, honor water spirit and deities through the songs, ceremonies performed by the riverbanks or seashores. These natural spaces are not chosen at random. They reflect an African worldview that sees the earth as sacred, where every element, stone, tree, water, wind, hold spiritual meaning. Together at these spaces is to return to our root, that where we connect or with who we are, to align with the rhythm of nature and to honor the presence of the divine in all things. A mountain with waterfall, an indigenous temple built in the rock-cut templates. Significant site in South Africa, which is mainly in Free State Province, associated with the great prophet Mansupa Makena. So yesterday, we saw a video that was playing, and then it was a speech by Dr. Imboni Uzulezwe. And then he could not be with us, and then he gave us a recorded speech where we saw a tractor that was planting. This is exactly the sacred place that I'm talking about, okay? We have bought the mountain, we have bought the land, okay? We have started already planting on that land just to equip our followers. We bought the mountain, and then we found some Bushman drawings, which is the way how they worship their creator through the temples in the rock. So now this mountain, they are very sacred to us as we practice African indigenous spirituality. We embark on this sacred pilgrimage to renew our vow and an unwavering devotion to our African indigenous spirituality with reverence and clarity of purpose. We reaffirm our spiritual path rooted in African spirituality. As I'm talking to you now, African calendar, we finished already the year. It was on the 31st of July. As you are busy sitting on 2025, we are already on 2026. So we go to these mountains to do our pilgrimage, okay, every year to celebrate and celebrate the new year, okay. In this wisdom of our ancestors, the sacred rhythm of the land and the divine guidance that has carried us through generation. In unity and in humanity, we also rededicate ourselves to the following teachings and the vision of our spiritual leader, who continue to guide us with the spiritual teachings, and we will also do our unwavering purpose, and the support of this journey is not just a movement across the land, but recommitting ourselves of the soul sacred ways. So what is the point? The point is there are so many sacred places that we don't even know. So we were very fortunate to find this sacred place which was owned by one of our old great prophet, Prophet Mansupa. How many more that are out there that need our attention? Thank you very much. That is my presentation.
Sorry, how are we doing for time? Okay. Okay. Okay, great. So thank you everyone for sharing your little bit for the collective on our sacred sites, and as you were alluding to, there are many sacred sites in Southern Africa that require recognition. So from the Sacred Sites Foundation side, what we've been doing is we've been meeting with different groups of people, and we are starting to map each of the sacred sites, and we have the spiritual interpretation of those sacred places, in other words, what they mean to the people, and the custodianship initiative that we are busy helping to coordinate. So essentially what we're looking for is for the spiritual leaders and communities that surround these sacred sites, and to set them up as the custodians and the protectors of these sacred sites, but for them to be open to allowing access to other peoples who see that particular mountain or that particular waterfall as having sacred value, and they wish to come there to pray. So we looked at meeting the people within the communities and selecting regional councillors for each area. Those people have to be elected by the people. They can't just be, I'm the leader. They must be voted and selected by the people as the cultural leader or as a spiritual leader. And everyone would be welcome at that table. Not just from the African perspective, but from the Khoi perspective, from the San perspective, because they all have history with these sacred places. And there is a dire need for the spiritual integrity of people to be restored in Southern Africa. It's a way to bring people together. So we looked at an event-based program. So when you have a sacred place, you speak to the people, and if there is a need to put some kind of interpretive center / museum, not on top of the mountain, but somewhere nearby, that can be used as a center for teaching the children and the community as well more about the collective culture and spiritual lifeways of the peoples that have spend time in that particular area. So it will be the custodianship management plan. We have a blueprint, but it is something that can always be improved upon. So going forward, I would like to offer that to the panel here as well, and to present it to you either separately in another time and space. And we've done some presentations when we've done the introduction to the communities and to the leaders. We call on all the stakeholders of the area, and we call them into a great big meeting where we then express the need for people to have access to these sacred sites, even if it's on private land, and then also to call out for those sacred artifacts, things that have been taken from the land, from the mountain, to be given back to the people. So if we work with each area, each community surrounding these sacred sites, we can access the lost treasures that hold spiritual value to the people, and place them in a place where the surrounding community can engage with it and use it as a platform for sharing their knowledge and wisdom of their ancestors and their culture. And then the sacred site itself becomes a place that the community can now visit together and go to pray, and even to open it up for spiritual events where other religious organizations can all come together in prayer on a specific day. So many of these sacred places were used, as you so rightfully said, to honor the cycles of nature and to connect with nature. So the time period you're talking about now is Imbolc, which is known as the awakening of spring, which begins like a new year. So everyone has different cultural beliefs, but if you go back in time, it was all connected to the cycles of life and nature, God's creation. So my wish is to support this in any which way I can as a member of the Sacred Sites Foundation of Southern Africa. And what I would like to do now is offer a 2-minute closure, or should I ask questions first in the, we can ask some questions? Yes?
Your first name.
Thank you so much. My name is Jane Mufamadi. I work for the Freedom Park. My question is directed to the Rabbi. I listened to you and the collaboration yesterday, which for me was, I think, the best, most impactful way to bring unity and solidarity. And the presentation that you made here also. Firstly, the similarities and the symbolism, because also from the African perspective, the 4 elements of water, fire, earth, and air, and the water, fire that you spoke about. But your scenario of Jerusalem as a common place for God and for prayer, I do believe what you're proposing would be the best solution. And I just wanted to find out, where do you think the challenge is in terms of pushing that proposal through, even by the king? Because by so doing, when people look at the place as a common place of convergence, irrespective of where they come from, maybe politically and so forth, they become the protectors of the space, and that unifies and solidifies the process. Do you think the challenges is within the faith-based communities and or from the government perspective or political? Thank you.
Yeah, so I feel we need both a bottom-up and top-down process. And I feel, in one component, again, I realize there are many components. One component, I feel, my institution works on the sacred sources, believing that to create we have to create the new language and the new story. A language saying that we are not rejecting any of our holy scripts, but we are deeply, deeply rooted in all of our holy books and feeling that we are devoted to the will of God in our vision. Often, visions of coexistence are coached in languages that are foreign to the region. But to say that we, as I began yesterday, I began from the Bible, B'Shem Ha'el Rachum V'Chanun, and then the opening verse of every surah in the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, to say that we are authentic. We are not outside coming to say, solve your problems, live together, but to speak with authenticity from our deep, deep roots. So we need, one component is from our loyal devotion to and faith in our sources. We need the people, but ultimately we need the leadership. We need leaders such as King Hussein of blessed memory, and Colonel mentioned another great hero, in my opinion, is King Mohammed VI of Morocco, his statements about Jerusalem and other issues have been very heartwarming. So we need many, and to empower the leaders need a support from their people, a language, a way of thinking, and ultimately people to realize, again, as I said, it's not a zero-sum game. It is, and ultimately we feel for the will of God and blessings for all are one. So this is a truth that we must spread to the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think guys.
Good day. So my question to the Rabbi is, I don't think that was an accurate representation of what's happening on the ground. I visited Palestine in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, And from entering the airport, it was a very antagonizing process of being questioned for many hours before we could even enter the city. And once we were able to enter into the holy mosque during the month of Ramadan, during the holiest month of the year, you have guards there searching you, closing the doors at all hours, making it very difficult for one to actually pray in the holy sites. And also just basic facilities for the maintenance and upkeep of the site. We all know the challenges that the Muslims are facing within Palestine to even upkeep Masjid al-Aqsa. If you go to the toilets of Masjid al-Aqsa, I don't think anyone will be comfortable using those facilities. Why? Because until now, the Israeli government are not giving them the ability to upgrade those facilities. The just basic cleaning facilities that were used in the mosque, until now they can't upgrade the machines. Why? Because they're unable to bring in new equipment. So these are all realities on the ground, and we experienced it during the month of Ramadan, if I'm not mistaken, just prior to COVID-19. So it would have been about 2018 when we visited. During the month of Ramadan, there was some Israeli National Day or something, and there was an entire group of people that entered the mosque, protected by the securities. And they came and they abused people, they threw tear gas at the people that were staying in the mosque for the last 10 days of the month of Ramadan. They threw tear gas into the mosque, and they were abusing the people and the worshippers that were in there in the holy sites. Another example is Masjid Khalil. That when we know what's happening in Masjid Khalil currently, where there was a massacre, where many Muslims, our brothers and sisters, were massacred. And after the massacre, during the morning prayers, after that, the Israeli authorities took ownership of the mosque. They then gave the Muslims a small portion of the mosque, taking control of a large majority of the mosque. And during this last few months ago, the entire mosque was now taken over by the municipality, where one of the ministers of Israel came into the mosque, and he mentioned what he mentioned, and we're all well aware of it. So I don't think what you're saying actually reflects the reality on the ground that we're seeing. And that's the reality of the Palestinian people that have to live every day through. And this is to do, and that's why we're so passionate about it, because it's about sites that we value very dearly, and what's being done to the people that are trying to protect those sites. Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for those comments. I think part of the tragic situation of conflict and fear is and certainly condemning that horrific act of terror against prayer in Misgad al-Khalil. And part of the reason why it's so necessary to think perhaps a part of fear is everyone fears if we change the status quo, it is a sliding slope that things will be worse, more theirs and less ours. That's why I believe in what I try to express, any changes to have something that gives something of true significance and value for all the people that are connected, to always create a better situation for all. But thank you for bringing some of the points to me to attention, such as the bathrooms I wasn't aware of. So in addition to the points they made about uniforms without any national identity, that's another point that I was less aware of. So thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Sylvia Mamhapi Peto. I come from a Chapter 9 institution called, it's a very long name. It's a commission for the protection of the rights of religious, cultural, and linguistic communities in South Africa. I would love to appreciate the presentation of the Freedom Park and the National Heritage Council. As much as we feel encouraged every time when these institutions give a picture about the heritage and, you know, the sacred spaces in South Africa. One wonders whether we have a political will to look at the ordinary spiritual people on the ground. South Africa is divided into cultural sacred spaces, spiritual spaces, historical sacred spaces, community cohesion spaces, and personal reflections and solace spaces. Now, as far as I have observed, I think more attention has been given to historical sacred spaces. You know, as South Africans, we have our own belief systems, different belief systems. And we have people who are using the caves, the mountains, the rivers, and the valleys to worship. Right? But unfortunately, because of lack of political will, we have found that all these sacred spaces have been affected by, number one, urbanization, number two, commercialization, number three, well, the impacts of climate change affect all of us. But I still believe that if we had a political will to protect the sacred sites in South Africa, an ordinary spiritualist in the village would not be abused by people who come from Europe, buy land here in South Africa. These people are used to using these spaces as their spiritual spaces. But you wake up one day, you want to go to the river, and then you find a fence. Somebody has bought that land. He owns the river and the mountain. And where are you supposed to go? In the very same mountain that you used to go and pray, you wake up one day that there's a board that says you trespass if you go through this gate. I mean, I'm talking about ordinary citizens of South Africa. I'm not worried about the Freedom Park. I'm not worried about the Table Mountains. Those are for people who are rich, people who can afford to take a flight from Free State and come to Cape Town. But I'm talking about ordinary people who have used these resources from during time immemorial. And who is supposed to protect these facilities if not the very same people who use these facilities? So I'm saying perhaps it's good when we give a picture, but do we have enough political will to protect these spaces? Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for your sharing. Yeah, I think we are all moving towards a plan to help to bring this to government's attention, which the foundation has been doing for many years already, but we need more of the communities surrounding. We need those leaders, both the cultural leaders and the spiritual leaders that are in and around these sacred places, and we will join forces with them to present the custodianship management plan for that sacred site by the indigenous peoples that surround that particular sacred place. So that is a plan that we've been helping to create, but we do need some strong forward movement in government in order for them to relinquish the control over these sacred places, whether they are on private land or not. These are undeniably sacred places of the ancient peoples. Whether you go back to the early sand peoples, to their rock paintings that are seen to first touch the sun, or the rock engravings that represent the raindrop, which is the water, places for rain ritual in many cultures in Africa. And people have to have the access to these places, because right now it's the spiritual core within people that is going to help them to get through a lot of what is going on in the world today. If we know that our spiritual connection to our God, to our Creator, to Great Spirit is strong, we will get the necessary guidance, and people need to be able to go to these ancient places, which in way back into ancient prehistoric times, were the places that people gathered to come together to strengthen their spiritual core within themselves, individually and collectively as a family, or as a clan, or as a tribe. So these places need to be opened up, and the custodianship must be done by the people, the indigenous communities that surround those places. All that is required is for the government to actually say, yes, we give you the permission to do this. If the permission is given, the support will be there, financially and otherwise, to help uplift the people. And it will not only improve their spiritual connection and integrity, but create potential opportunities for work as well, for people to share their cultural knowledge through the interpretive centers, or potentially the museums that are created nearby these sacred places. Were there any other questions?
Yes, what I would like to tease is this notion of the body-mind dichotomy. The mind is more important than the body. From an African perspective, the mind is not more important than the body. Hence, we talk about the notion of a relationship between what you see, what exists, and what does not exist. Now, when we talk about the belief systems, we separate it from the practices. But as we have heard here, there is a constant relationship between belief systems and practices. So I feel very strongly about that we can't separate the belief systems and say they are away from the practices. They are related. They embody the same body. If you ask me, Antrops Guma, Laiti van die Kaap, what is Sotho, Yataura, but I didn't grow up in those language environments. But you see me, and you think that I'm seeing that Laiti matter, it goes beyond that. That is the point that we should inculcate in our minds, in practices, that we can't talk about beliefs without practices. Hence we say it's a tripartite relationship. There's the body, the mind, what we call the spirit, and you've got the abstract, which is related to the body. So the notion of embodiment, it's more significant when we talk about the organic way of interpreting life practices. Are you with me? Yes. So that is very significant that when we talk about belief systems, we can't separate the practices, because the practices are the what are causing the challenges that we're having today. Because when you believe in something, you do something in order to verify what you think is correct. Hence, in the indigenous languages, they say that isiziba siviwa godondolo. When you hear the order of McDonald's, does it mean you know the taste how McDonald's is? But when you buy McDonald's and you have the taste, you say, oh man, if there was a less sugar there or less, it would be, and then you come up with your own intellectual property, which is based on experience and practice. So let us not look at the sacred sites as a matter of just the beliefs that the beliefs. We have just said now, you have just said that people are doing this because they think this is the right way of doing it. Then are you with me? So let us move away from this notion of the beliefs as separated from the practices. We should talk about the tripartite system, the spirit, the body, and what? And the practice that informs the movement of transformation. But the moment we separate the three, lihuta, that's the suit, the crawl, relationship, then we're finished. We'll always end up and say who's most important and not important. No, we're not supposed to be doing that. We're supposed to be talking what is the relationship, that the common purpose, to reach the common purpose. Rather than what I can get, if I got boodle, then I'm the one, you must listen to me. No. Anyway, I just wanted to change that so that we move away from this notion of the belief system. They have their practices, beliefs and practices, because they engage spirituality, the physical aspect as well as the abstract aspect.
Thank you, Dr. Goma. That's helpful and very educational. And I think, Mr. Sibisi, you can respond to that more. But I wanted to just add on what Sylvia was saying. Sylvia, I think all of us sitting here, we really echo your sentiments around access issues. That's what we all based our initial discussions on, issues of access, the private ownership of these spaces, and etc. But also, and as much as spaces like Freedom Park, they are paid services, you have to pay a fee to be able to access through various community engagement work, because we are neutral as an entity. We work with all faiths. We welcome everyone, and you are able to then speak to us and be able to access these sites at no cost at all. But also that as much as we have these sort of a talk shop, Dean, maybe another thing that we must champion and come out strongly as this panel and our report to now this conference is to the Cultural Rights Commission. It exists. Dr. Gavenda is actually here, Silva. We must go together. I saw him, because that's their role. Their role is to make sure that human rights to access to all these cultural sites is restored. It's their work, it's their mandate, and they are legally allowed to do so as per the CLR Act. That's what their work is to do. So let's go there. Let's say this is what came out strongly from our panel. Yes. Our people are still crying about access to these sacred sites. What are you as the commission are doing? Can we put in a petition? Can we put in a program of action together so that we can mobilize access for all our people? And speaking even of practices, Dr. Goma, I know a little bit I highlighted the issue that it's not just sites, it's now even the intangibles that transcend now these sites, the belief systems, the practices, the commemorations and everything that's beautiful that our people do from these sites. One of the most heartbreaking things I read about recently, and again, it speaks to issues of access, was the complaints, especially in mountain sites and even in beaches, of the owners of the land complaining about these people are coming to do their rituals, they're slaughtering chickens here. It's making our environment dirty. How do we make sure that our people have now the spaces where their practices can be carried out with dignity? So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Last 2 minutes. Okay, no, thank you so much. I'm not going to respond because Slindo has already responded. For me, it's just to say what is important, it's education and awareness, including with the authorities that be it government. One will think that because they are at legislature in parliament, they understand. It's not the case. So they still need to be educated about the importance, of our heritage. Our constitution, luckily, put emphasis on the right to cultural practice. It's very important that that be respected and be promoted, but we need to educate and make people aware. We've got UNESCO. Our government needs to come up with legislation that, ensure that indigenous people's rights are protected, practitioners' rights are also protected, and they have access. This access shouldn't be, an issue that needs to be negotiated. Because when these things were taken away, when land was taken away from the people, there was no negotiation. When these objects and artifacts were taken away, there was no negotiations. On a lighter note, I always say, until such time where you find that even in a hospital, which is managed by Africans, but you still, that there is no tolerance and appreciation where they allow poor Mulaudzi to go and burn incense, but they accommodate Holy Communion. And we even find, Anglican and Roman Catholics, I don't know those ones who burn things, but because it's being done in the Western way.
But it's originally from Africa.
And it's African. So, but we don't allow our own people to do and practice that. So until such time that happens, I think we still have a work is cut out. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I don't think there's much just to elaborate on. However, as I've said earlier on, I am under AIS, which is African Indigenous Spirituality. The most important thing in our area is basically a spirit. Spirit is actually number one. You need to feed your spirit. I agree again with Ubaba. We will be different. We will never be the same. Okay? So in religion, they said there is a part of believing. But in spirituality, we don't believe. We know. We know. Because everything that happened, our spirit remember that there was something like this before. There was these things that our ancestors were following long time ago, but they are now suppressed. Now, through our connection, through this important site that I've mentioned, we connect with our spirit. Is that where we get the direction through the revelations? Okay, we have to work together. My speech yesterday was that we have to work together. It doesn't matter which dogma you are in, but let us accommodate each other. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, so I promised that at the end, since the problems are well known, to say that there are some points of life in the light in the present, so there's something to hold on to. So first, since the story of this picture, there was a yearly event in which Jews, Muslims, Christians, Israelis, and Palestinians would form an enormous human wall to give a massive hug to the walls of the old city of Jerusalem, to say, we want this place to unite us and not divide us. And somebody took this picture, this with my fatherly figure, Hajj Ibrahim Alawa, a family that's lived on the Mount of Olives for 800 years. And somehow Google picked it for Picture of the Year in the category of searching to make sense. And even walking the streets, the fact that, which is throughout Israel, not only Hebrew, but Arabic and English are also national languages. All street signs are in 3 languages. And I always are moved because I feel we have the language of the Bible, Hebrew, the language of the Quran, Arabic, and the language of the King James Bible, English. And another little known fact is, I believe Israel is the only non-Muslim country in the world that has not only government supported, but with legal validity for Sharia courts. A close friend of mine is the manager of the Sharia courts of Israel, Qadi, which means judge, Yad Zachalka, and it's so moving when he talks about his pride that his courts are the one courts in the world that still follow the directives of the Ottoman Empire, of the Caliphate, feeling that the vestige of the ancient protocol of the Caliphate is still alive in his Sharia courts. And finally, and with this I will end, I feel in general temples are, it's not about the buildings, it's mostly about the spirit. I mentioned before that 3 years ago I had a major brain hemorrhage, and I found myself, I was still in the hospital on the 9th of Av, the day which the Jewish people remember and mourn the destruction of the ancient temple. And I said, wait a second, I'm here in Jerusalem, and what was the temple? A place to bring blessing and life in the life, and I'm in a hospital. This is bringing life. But most of all, a house of prayer for all people, and very moving in the hospitals, whether all of the staff, the doctors and nurses who took such loving care of me were Jews, Muslims, Christians, and in the hallways, we have Jews, Muslim, Christians, all praying, both for their beloved ones, but also for the others. I truly felt on that day in a sacred spot, a deeply spiritual temple. Bless you all.
Thank you, everybody. I think I'm going to sign off and say thank you for everyone for attending. And I think the great follow-on here is for us to continue this discussion and collaboration. And if any of you out in the audience here can offer any support, feel free to connect with any of us and offer your expertise or your insights or your questions to us, and we will see what we can do. So thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Group photo. Can all
Oh, yes. Yes.
Well,
bring your chair forward.
Photo of you
The
first.
podium.
We'll do a photo of you first.
Stand up. Yeah.
Okay. We'll do a photo.